A child with nothing sees a hand drowning in the river. What he does next will change 2 lives forever. But the woman he saves is hiding a secret that will shock everyone. Before we dive into this incredible true story, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss stories that restore your faith in humanity. Now let's begin. The sun was sinking low over the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. But for 9-year-old Elijah, sunsets meant something different. They meant finding shelter before darkness swallowed the streets. They meant another day of survival in a world that had forgotten he existed. Elijah walked along the muddy riverbank with small, tired steps. His bare feet were covered in dirt, his clothes hung loose and torn on his thin frame. Every day was the same, wandering through alleys, searching through garbage bins, collecting bottles and cans to trade for a few coins. Just enough to buy a piece of bread. Just enough to survive one more day. But today, something felt different. The air was heavier somehow. Even the birds seemed quieter than usual, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The river had become his only friend. It never judged him for his ragged clothes or empty stomach. Here, by the water's edge, he could sit and pretend he was someone else. Someone who mattered. Someone who had a home to return to, warm meals waiting, and people who loved him. He crouched down by the shore, letting the cool water wash over his dirty fingers. For just a moment, he allowed himself to dream. He imagined a soft bed, a table full of food, a voice calling his name with warmth instead of anger or pity. He imagined what it would feel like to be wanted. But dreams never lasted long for children like Elijah. He sighed softly and stood up, preparing to head back to his usual spot under the old railway bridge. The stray dogs would be waiting there. They were his family now, the only creatures who didn't turn away when he approached. That's when he heard it. A sound that didn't belong to the gentle flow of the river or the whisper of the wind through the trees. It was a human sound. A cry. Desperate. Terrified. Fading. Elijah's heart jumped into his throat. He spun around, his eyes scanning the darkening water. Help! The voice was weak, breaking with panic. Please, someone, help me. His eyes locked onto movement in the middle of the river. A woman, elderly, her gray hair plastered to her face, was thrashing in the water. Her arms flailed wildly, trying to grab onto something, anything. But there was nothing. The current was pulling her under, dragging her down like hungry hands reaching from below. She was drowning. Fear shot through Elijah's small body like lightning. He looked around frantically. Surely someone else would come. An adult. Someone stronger. Someone who knew what to do. But the riverbank was empty. Completely empty. It was just him. A 9-year-old boy with nothing. And a woman who was about to die. Please, she screamed again, her voice cracking. Her head dipped below the surface for a moment, then broke through again, gasping. Please. I can't. I can't. Something inside Elijah snapped. He didn't think. He didn't calculate. He didn't wonder if he was strong enough or brave enough. He just moved. His small legs sprinted toward the water, splashing through the shallow edges. His heart hammered so hard he thought it might burst from his chest. The cold river bit at his skin as he waded deeper, the current immediately pulling at his thin body. Hold on, he shouted, his voice small against the roar of the water. I'm coming. The woman's eyes found his, wide, terrified, filled with the kind of fear that comes when death is close enough to feel its breath. She reached out with trembling hands, her fingers grasping at air. Elijah pushed forward, the water now up to his chest. It was so cold, so strong. He could feel it trying to sweep him away too. But he couldn't stop. He wouldn't stop. Please. She choked out, water filling her mouth. Please don't let me. She went under again. No. Elijah lunged forward with everything he had. His small hand shot into the water, searching blindly. His fingers brushed against fabric, then skin. He grabbed her wrist and held on with all his strength. Her hand was freezing. Her grip was weak. But he refused to let go. I've got you, he cried out, his voice shaking. I won't let you go. The current fought him like a living creature, trying to rip her from his grasp. His feet slipped on the rocks below. His arms burned with effort. Tears stung his eyes, mixing with the river water splashing his face. But Elijah had lived his entire life fighting. Fighting for food. Fighting for shelter. Fighting to survive another day. And he wasn't about to lose this fight. He planted his feet as firmly as he could and pulled. Pulled with every ounce of strength his small body possessed. The woman's head broke the surface again, and she gasped desperately for air. Don't let go. She sobbed between coughs. "I won't," Elijah promised through gritted teeth. "I won't." Inch by inch, he dragged her toward the shore. His muscles screamed. His lungs burned. But he kept pulling, kept fighting. Finally, his feet found solid ground. He stumbled backward onto the muddy bank, pulling the woman with him. She collapsed onto the dirt, coughing violently, water pouring from her mouth and nose. Elijah fell to his knees beside her, his entire body shaking, from cold, from exhaustion, from the weight of what had just happened. He had saved her. A homeless boy who had nothing had just given this woman everything. The woman lay on the riverbank, gasping for air like someone who had just been pulled from the grave itself. Her whole body trembled violently, from the cold water, from the shock, from the terrifying closeness of death. She coughed again and again, expelling the river from her lungs. Elijah knelt beside her, unsure what to do. He had never saved anyone before. He had never even been in a position to help someone. His small hand hovered over her shoulder, and finally, he gently patted her back, the way he'd seen people comfort each other from a distance. Slowly, the woman's breathing steadied. She turned her head to look at him, and when their eyes met, tears began streaming down her face. Not from the river, from something deeper. "You," she whispered, her voice hoarse and broken. "You saved me." Elijah looked down, suddenly shy. He wasn't used to gratitude. He wasn't used to being seen at all. "You were drowning," he said quietly. "I couldn't just watch." The woman pushed herself up into a sitting position, wincing with pain and exhaustion. She stared at the small boy before her. This child with dirt-streaked cheeks, torn clothes hanging from his thin frame, bare feet covered in mud. This child who had risked everything to save a complete stranger. Her heart broke in a way the river never could. "What's your name, sweetheart?" she asked softly, her voice still shaking. "Elijah," he answered, barely above a whisper. "Elijah," she repeated, as if the name itself was sacred. "I'm Victoria. Victoria Chun." They sat together in silence for a moment, both catching their breath. The sun had nearly set now, and the sky had turned deep purple. The river continued its endless flow behind them, indifferent to the miracle that had just occurred on its banks. Victoria studied the boy carefully. There was something in his eyes, a depth of loneliness that no child should carry. She noticed his clothes were stiff with days of wear. His hair was tangled and unwashed. His small hands were scratched and calloused. "Elijah," she said gently, "where are your parents? Won't they be worried about you?" The boy's gaze dropped to the ground. He picked at the grass with his fingers, unable to meet her eyes. "I don't have parents," he said, so quietly she almost didn't hear him. "I don't have anyone." The words hit Victoria like a physical blow. Her hand flew to her chest. "What do you mean, darling? Where do you live?" Elijah hesitated. People usually looked at him differently when they knew the truth. With pity, with disgust, with fear. But something about this woman felt safe. "Under the railway bridge," he whispered. "On the east side of town." Victoria's breath caught in her throat. "You live on the streets?" He nodded slowly, still not looking at her. "How long?" she asked, her voice trembling. Elijah shrugged. "Always, I think. I don't really remember anything else." Victoria's tears returned, flowing freely now. She reached out and gently touched his cheek, brushing away some of the dirt. He flinched slightly, not from fear, but from the unfamiliarity of a gentle touch. "Tell me about your life, Elijah," she said softly. "Please." And so he did. In his small, quiet voice, he told her everything. About the cold nights when the wind cut through his thin blanket. About the hunger that twisted his stomach into knots. About the stray dogs he shared scraps with because they were the only ones who didn't chase him away. About the rain that sometimes woke him at dawn, soaking him to the bone. About the cardboard box he used as a pillow because it was better than sleeping on bare concrete. He spoke about it matter-of-factly, as if describing the weather. To him, this was normal. This was life. But to Victoria, every word was a dagger to the heart. She thought about her own life. The comfortable bed she slept in, the meals she took for granted, the security she never questioned. And here was this child, this brave, selfless child, who had nothing but still found it in his heart to save her life. "Why did you help me?" she asked suddenly, her voice thick with emotion. "You could have drowned too. Why would you risk your life for a stranger?" Elijah finally looked up at her. His eyes were wide and honest. "You were scared," he said simply. "And no one else came. I know what it feels like when you're scared and no one comes." Victoria's chest tightened so much she thought her heart might stop. In that moment, she understood. This boy hadn't just been saving her. He was saving the part of himself that had been left alone so many times before. She reached out and took both of his small hands in hers. "Elijah," she said, her voice fierce with determination, "I want you to listen to me very carefully. What you did today, most adults wouldn't have that kind of courage. You are extraordinary. Do you understand me? You are a hero." The boy shook his head. "I'm not special. You are," she interrupted firmly. "And I'm going to prove it to you." Elijah looked confused. "What do you mean?" Victoria took a deep breath. Her hands were still shaking, but not from the cold anymore. She was shaking because she knew her life had just changed direction forever. She couldn't walk away from this child. Not after what he'd done. Not after seeing the emptiness in his brave little heart. "I have something to tell you," she said carefully. "Something important." The boy waited, his eyes wide with curiosity and a hint of nervousness. Victoria reached into her soaked jacket pocket and pulled out a small metal card, her bank card, embossed with gold lettering. She held it in her trembling fingers, wondering how to explain. "Elijah," she began slowly, "I'm not just an ordinary old woman. I'm very wealthy. Do you know what that means?" He shook his head, not quite understanding. She tried again. "It means I have a lot of money. More money than most people. More than I could ever spend in 10 lifetimes. The boy blinked, still confused about why this mattered. "You saved a millionaire today," Victoria whispered, her eyes filling with tears again. "And millionaires don't forget the people who save their lives." Elijah's eyes grew wider. He started to pull his hands away, suddenly afraid he'd done something wrong, that he didn't belong near someone like her. But Victoria held on tightly. "No, sweetheart. Don't be afraid," she said quickly. "What I'm trying to tell you is this. You changed my life today. And now I want to change yours." "I don't understand," Elijah said, his voice small. Victoria squeezed his hands gently, looking directly into his eyes with an intensity that made him hold his breath. "I'm going to take care of you, Elijah. From this moment forward, you will never sleep under a bridge again. You will never go hungry again. You will never be alone again." The boy's breath caught in his throat. Hope flickered in his chest, fragile, terrifying, desperate hope. "Do you mean it?" he whispered. "I promise you," Victoria said, tears streaming down her face. "I promise you with everything I am." And in that moment, two worlds that should never have touched collided at the river's edge. A homeless boy with nothing. A wealthy woman with everything. Both of them saved by the same act of courage. But the story wasn't over yet. Victoria had one more secret. One that would explain why she was at that river in the first place. Chapter 3. The Secret Millionaire. Victoria helped Elijah to his feet, both of them still dripping with river water. The evening air was growing colder, and she could see the boy shivering. She took off her jacket, soaked as it was, and draped it around his small shoulders anyway. It was a gesture, a promise of warmth to come. "Come," she said gently. "Let's sit somewhere more comfortable." They moved to a nearby bench overlooking the river. The same river that had nearly claimed Victoria's life now sparkled peacefully under the rising moon, as if nothing had happened at all. Victoria sat down slowly, her body still aching from the ordeal. Elijah sat beside her, his small frame almost disappearing in her oversized jacket. He watched her carefully, still unsure if this was real or just another dream that would vanish when he woke up under the bridge. Victoria looked out at the water, and her expression changed. The gratitude was still there, but now it was mixed with something else. Something darker. Sadness. Shame. Pain. "Elijah," she began, her voice trembling, "I need to tell you something. Something I've never told anyone before." The boy turned to her, listening with the full attention only children can give. "My real name isn't just Victoria Chun," she said quietly. "It's Genevieve Laurent." She paused, watching to see if the name meant anything to him. It didn't. Of course it didn't. Street children didn't read business magazines or watch financial news. "I am the founder of Laurent Industries," she continued. "It's one of the largest companies in this region. I have more money than I could spend in 5 lifetimes. Mansions, cars, people who work for me. Everything the world says should make a person happy." Elijah frowned, confused. "But, if you have everything, why were you?" He stopped, unsure how to finish the question. Victoria's eyes filled with tears again, but these were different tears. These came from a place of deep, overwhelming pain. "Why was I in that river?" she finished for him. Her voice cracked. "Because, Elijah, I didn't fall in by accident. The boy's eyes widened with sudden understanding. I jumped, Victoria whispered, the confession breaking something open inside her. I went to that river today planning to end my life. The words hung in the air between them, heavy and terrible. Elijah's small hand reached out and grabbed hers instinctively, holding on tight. The same way he'd held on when pulling her from the water. Victoria looked down at their joined hands and sobbed. For years, I've had everything money could buy, she continued, her voice shaking. But I've never had purpose. Never had meaning. My husband died 10 years ago. We never had children. My company runs itself now. I'm just a name on the letterhead. I wake up every day in a mansion that feels like a tomb. I'm surrounded by employees who smile at me, but don't know me. By people who want my money, but not my friendship. She wiped her eyes with her free hand, but the tears kept coming. I've been so lonely, Elijah. So unbearably lonely. I have everything, and I have nothing. And I thought the river would be my escape. My way out of this empty, purposeless life. Elijah squeezed her hand tighter. He didn't have words for what he was hearing, but he understood loneliness. He understood it better than anyone. I walked to that river today with stones in my pockets, Victoria continued, her voice barely audible now. I was ready to let the water take me. Ready to finally stop feeling this pain. She turned to look at Elijah directly, and her eyes were filled with something fierce and burning. But then I heard your voice. Your small, brave voice shouting that you wouldn't let me go. I felt your tiny hands refusing to release me even when the current tried to pull us both under. And Elijah, you didn't just save me from drowning. Her voice broke completely. You saved me from giving up on life itself. Elijah's own eyes filled with tears now. He didn't fully understand wealth or business empires, but he understood pain. He understood what it meant to feel invisible and unwanted. You're not alone anymore, he said softly. I'm here. Victoria let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. This child, this beautiful, impossible child who had absolutely nothing, was comforting her. Don't you see? She said, pulling him into a gentle embrace. You gave me something no amount of money could ever buy. You gave me a reason to live. You reminded me that life is still worth fighting for. She pulled back and looked at him seriously. And now, she said, her voice growing stronger, let me give you everything you've never had. Let me be the person who finally tells you that you matter. That you're worthy. That you deserve to be loved. But I'm nobody, Elijah whispered. I'm just a street kid. I don't know how to live in a fancy house. I don't know how to. You're not nobody, Victoria said firmly. You're the bravest person I've ever met. And you're about to become my family. Elijah's breath caught. Family? I'm going to adopt you, Elijah. Legally. Officially. You'll have my name if you want it. You'll have a home, an education, everything you need. But more than that, you'll have me. You'll have someone who chooses you. Who wants you. Who loves you. The boy couldn't hold back anymore. He collapsed into her arms and cried. Deep, heaving sobs that shook his entire small body. Years of loneliness, fear, and abandonment poured out of him in those tears. And Victoria held him. This woman who had nearly given up on the world held this child who had every reason to give up but never did. You gave me a reason to live, she whispered into his hair. Now let me give you a reason to dream. 6 months later, the black sedan pulled up to the riverbank and 2 figures stepped out. Genevieve Laurent, no longer hiding behind a false name, walked carefully toward the water's edge. Beside her was Elijah Laurent, wearing a clean school uniform, his hair neatly combed, his face bright with health and happiness. They stood together, looking at the river where their lives had collided. Do you ever think about that day? Genevieve asked softly. Elijah nodded. Every day. Me too, she said, taking his hand. Do you know what I think about most? What? I think about how I almost missed this. All of this. If you hadn't been there, if you hadn't been brave enough to jump in, I would have missed watching you grow. Missed hearing you laugh. Missed being your grandmother. Elijah squeezed her hand. And I would have missed having a family. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the water flow endlessly by. Grandmother? Elijah said after a moment. Yes, darling. Thank you for choosing me. Genevieve knelt down so she was eye level with him, just like she had that first day. But this time, both of them were dry, warm, and safe. Oh, my sweet boy, she said, her eyes glistening. Thank you for choosing me first. Thank you for seeing someone drowning and deciding they were worth saving. She pulled him into a hug, and they stayed like that for a long moment. You know, Genevieve said as they walked back toward the car. People ask me all the time what the best investment I ever made was. What do you tell them? She smiled down at him. I tell them the truth. That the best investment I ever made was being saved by a 9-year-old boy who had nothing but gave everything. Elijah grinned. And what do they say? They don't understand. But we do, don't we? Yeah, Elijah said. We do. As they drove away from the river, Genevieve glanced in the rearview mirror. The water sparkled in the sunlight, looking peaceful and innocent. To anyone else, it was just a river. But to them, it was the place where 2 drowning souls had saved each other. Where a child with nothing taught a woman with everything what really mattered. Where an ending became a beginning. And where 2 lonely hearts became a family. Sometimes the people we save end up saving us right back. Sometimes courage doesn't come from strength or size. It comes from a heart that refuses to look away when someone needs help. And sometimes the most valuable thing a person can possess isn't money or power. It's the willingness to hold on when everything tells you to let go. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment below sharing a time when someone's kindness changed your life. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that remind us what it means to be human.